Hey everyone, welcome back to Dave's Auto DIY. Today we're going to tackle the bushings on the differential on my 1990 Miata. This is part of my overall effort to upgrade and replace all the rubber components on this older car. The route I've chosen is I bought these Super Pro poly bushing inserts from Flying Miata. I will insert the link in the description. And these promised to be a slightly easier upgrade than fully replacing the bushings in the differential. Let's see how easy it is. You're watching Dave's Auto DIY. So why do I want to replace these bushings at all? The bushings can wear out over time and allow some play between the differential and the subframe. So by stiffening up that connection, you can improve the power transfer to your rear wheels. To lower the differential, there are two 12mm bolt or nuts connecting this bracket that holds on the bottom of the bushing on either side, and there's a 17mm nut in the middle of the bushing. Then they're on either side, and then there are two 17mm bolts here to connect the differential to the PPF, the power plant frame, and all of those have to come off to be able to lower the differential using a jack, slowly lower the differential low enough that we can get it off the studs. So the first thing I did was I went around and tried to get off the nuts and then reattach them with lots of anti-seize so they come off easy later. Using penetrating oil, the 17mm nuts came off okay. One of the 12mm nuts, I ended up rounding it because it was quite rusty and the socket wouldn't fit snug on there. So I rounded it, used a nut extractor, and put on a new nut. It was the two bolts attaching the differential to the power plant frame which proved to be the most difficult. The front bolt, this one, for me, did come off eventually using about 3-4-foot breaker bar and my impact gun, which goes up to 350 foot-pounds, just going forward, backwards, forward, backwards, forward, backwards. Eventually that bolt did come loose. The rear bolt on the power plant frame was a real disaster. I spent 2 days using penetrating oil and different techniques, including a 4-foot breaker bar, my 350 foot-pound impact gun repeatedly. I couldn't get it to budge. Eventually I gave up, thinking my backup strategy was to cut the bolt in half where it's exposed in the middle and then being able to knock it out from each end. When I came back the following weekend, I tried again and it was a miracle. I got to move I nudged it forward and I nudged it back using a 4-foot breaker bar, enough that after doing that a few times, putting the impact gun on it, I was able to go forward, backward until I got it loose. Even when it was loose, it wouldn't come out because the center section was all corroded. So I had to sand that center section down so that it would be able to slide out through that bottom sleeve. Then I put everything back together, torqued it up, using lots of anti-seize so that they would come off easily when I had a chance to come back to finish this job. Alright, so the day's finally come where I'm going to finish this job. And so the first task will be to remove these 17mm power plant frame bolts. Next, we'll use a chisel to try to get off this little fitting off the bottom. There's a notch here on the side. I'm going to get in there and try to bang it out a little bit. Okay, so gradually using a chisel and a hammer and prying it out little by little, this piece comes out of the front hole. So I ran into a little snag. So I got that bottom fitting off, but then the next step was to reinsert the bolts, thread them into the top fitting, and then tap them off because they're a press fit into the top part of the power plant frame. But when I was doing before, the holes no longer lined up. So I think the differential is twisted a little bit this way. So I'm going to take it off the mount and see if I can twist it back to be able to get these holes to line up in the power plant frame. So I went ahead and got a jack, put a puck on top of the jack to stay in between the jack and the differential, took the weight off, went ahead and removed the 12 millimeters on the brackets, and then the 17 millimeter center nuts on the brackets. And the bracket plates come off and look like this. I cleaned it up a little bit and repainted it before sticking it back on. So that did work. Once I took off the brackets, I was able to rotate the differential enough to line up the bolts, thread them into the top sockets, and then I tried to tap them out from the bottom. So once the top pieces popped out, I removed the bolts and removed the top pieces, and they look like this. One for each threaded bolt. Now that the power plant frame is completely disconnected, I was able to shove it off to the side and start to slowly lower the differential off the brackets. Now, to give myself a little bit more space, I also disconnected the muffler and let it hang down a couple inches so that I would have a little bit more space to lower the differential. And then I was all set to install the bushing inserts. So the kit comes with some grease. We apply the grease to the top bushing insert and put some grease around the rounded side. Put this into, with the flat side up, into the void space in the top of the old bushing. And then same thing with the bottom part. We'll put some grease on it. This grease is going to help reduce the squeaking. And it fits into the bracket, into the void space. It looks like that. So I jacked it back up onto the studs, reattached the plate, including the new bushing inserts, and tightened back up the nuts, just hand tight, so that there's still enough play that I could line up the bolts in the power plant frame. I've removed the jack as it's now fully supported on the studs. I positioned the power plant frame back on the differential mount, and now I've got to make sure I line up those holes. It was a little tricky getting those holes lined up. I found I had to reposition the jack more forward on the differential to change where the lift point was, to rotate it a little bit to get the holes to line up. Then I re-put in the top pieces into the power plant frame, hand threaded the bolts in before doing the initial tightening with my impact gun, final torquing with my torque wrench to 85 foot-pounds, and then the final torquing on the center nut on the bushings to 72 foot-pounds. And just 18 to 22 on the 12s. I'm going with 20 foot-pounds. So that's it. It's all back together. Everything's torqued up. Nothing left but to go for a test drive. All right, out for a test drive. It feels good. I can't say that it feels a lot different, but it feels good. Let's try some acceleration tests. I think it's good. So I think this was another one of those small incremental improvements that are adding up. So overall, I'm satisfied. I hope you learned something. I hope you hit subscribe, and I hope to see you next time on Dave's Auto DIY.